Hello and welcome to the CBB Supershow, brought to you by the FTN Network. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, a.k.a. Dub Deuces 85, the niche sports connoisseur, college basketball aficionado. We are officially in conference championship week. I know a few started last week with the mid-majors, but P5s start tomorrow. We're in it. Day basketball for the next few days. It's going to be magnificent. We are on our way to Selection Sunday, if you can believe it. It's such a bittersweet moment because honestly, I love college basketball so much. I love the grind. I love when we get past Halloween and into November, ready to go. And it is an absolute grind, but my goodness, we are in March. Selection Sunday. It's just about over. Limited opportunities left to get into the bracket qualifying mania, like 9 or 10 seats left. Still no chance, but they're limited. We also have a lot of opportunities still to pad your bankroll with not only this week, but also next week we'll have the combo NIT/play-in slates. Then, of course, day one of the tournament, all day long Thursday, day 2, day 3, day 4, all that good stuff. And thanks to the tips from our friend Raz over on the show on Friday, he told us that the powers that be told him that there will be Survivor contests on DK. Whether we see qualifiers or satellites for that or not, I'm not sure. But Survivor contests are one of the best things in all of DFS, in my opinion. Really fun thing. What they did in the past was days 1 through 4. Then they did a Sweet 16 Elite 8 Survivor as well, which obviously had a lot of overlap. But those first 2 rounds, really, there's not a lot better. Upsets, buzzer beaters, everything. Tons of fun. Lots of prize pools, huge prize pools, casual players. Everybody is going to come together for a very, very fun time. What we do here on the Super Show, if you're new and just tuning in for the first time, thank you. We cover DFS slates mostly on DraftKings, but we do answer questions on FanDuel as well. And there will be a lot of FanDuel coverage next week, so have no fear about that. We go game by game, breaking down each matchup that is on the main slate, or in this case, the early slate. We also talk about PrizePicks, any betting opportunities, prop picks galore, talking about DFS side, any underpriced, overpriced options, sneaks, fades, all of that good stuff. We also provide a 2 to 3 player core at the end, and we'll answer any and all questions, comments, and concerns live on the show, but also on demand as we circle back around and check those comments throughout. Everybody come together, new or old. If you're a veteran, you got your seat, you got your donut, you got your coffee, whatever it is. You got maybe a little bit of NyQuil. I don't know, whatever you got to do to sleep. And hit that like button for us. Really does help not only my show, but the FTN Network channel in general. And we really do appreciate it. We are getting a ton of views across the board on all shows, but especially on the Super Show and Mike Randall's CBB sports betting show that he does pretty much every morning, it seems like, but Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday mornings, he's got some cool stuff going on. We'll be doing shows not only tonight, but tomorrow night, Friday night, Saturday night, and then live. We'll be on a few minutes before Selection Sunday starts, and then we'll be breaking those down, those pairings, those seeds, who got left out, who got put in, all of that stuff. We'll have special guests on that one. We'll be bringing people on, giving their takes as the seedings are announced. Lots of good stuff. We'll also have contests, not only a bracket pool for not only the CBB Discord and fans and viewers of the show, but also drafts for DFS-style season-long leagues in which we will draft players from the available options in the tournament. That'll be a 10 to 12-man type of thing, and if we fill that up, we'll have another one. We fill that up, we'll have another one, et cetera, et cetera. We'll just keep making leagues until we run out of people who want to be in them. All right. With that being said, let's get right into it. We're not going to have the night slate to talk about or the main slate right now. The tournament's still going on in the WCC. Gonzaga is beating San Francisco 68-52 currently. With that being said, there is going to be a main slate that takes place, but we're going to primarily be focused on the 5-game early slate, which is actually kind of just an all-day affair. Kicks off at 9:30 in the morning Pacific time. The last game on that particular slate starts at 3:45 Pacific. Probably will be a little bit later than that. They did space the games out slightly. They do this 2-hour thing, right? And that just doesn't work. With conference tournaments, obviously a game's not going to end in 2 hours. Get starters, game starts, there you go. So they did space it out slightly to make up for that, which I appreciate. But inevitably what's going to happen is a game will run long. You guys got a little bit of preview of that today with the Horizon League. We're just not going to get starters for that second game in a conference tournament. It's just not going to happen. Maybe it will if a game gets done soon enough or a team tweets out their starting lineup or any player news. But ordinarily, stat broadcast just isn't, which we use mostly, and sometimes sidearm stats. It's just not going to be updated in time for those starters. So my recommendation, if you can't be on top of the news or the Discord, or you're making a lineup and stepping away, would be to stay away from players who maybe have injury designations, maybe are up in the air, uncertain. We've seen a ton over the last couple of weeks come in highly questionable, borderline doubtful, end up playing. We've seen players who are probable not play. It's just been all over the place, and news is sometimes hit or miss. With these P5 slates and these higher level teams, we typically get that news, and we do have a lot more coverage of that. The low to mid majors are sometimes spotty. You have to go into message boards, ask different beats online, so it's a little bit tougher there. Try to stay away from injury situations that you can't pay attention to. The nice thing is in the Big 12 tournament, Cincinnati, Virginia, West Virginia, the main one there is going to be Victor Locken. I think we'll know ahead of time. We'll probably see warm-ups. As long as that first game, UCF, Oklahoma State, doesn't run super long, we'll probably get news. As it stands right now, it sounds like he's not going to play. So I'm gonna go through that particular matchup here in a minute as if he's not playing. And then if he does, we'll just kind of talk about that as well. All right, so first game on the slate we're going to hit here. Gonna lose sleep wondering if DJ Horn will play tomorrow or not. That is another one that we'll be worrying about there. The great Adam Young, one of the best editors in the world. Very good tilter too, by the way. I had to let him know who the real tilting king is, but he's a real good one. He's one of the best, actually. So I appreciate you checking us out and staying up late here. Hopefully you're having a good evening there, my friend. Resident Michigan State hater and Rocket Watts, who is semi-benched. I think that term applies. What do you play, 3.5 minutes? For sure. All right, let's get into the slate here. Oklahoma State, UCF will kick us off. UCF, a 4-point favorite, total of 136. Now, talking with my good friend John Schiller, if you don't know that name, that is the once dominant and still dominant Varnicus, who used to write for RG. He's kind of in retirement now. Talking with him tonight and kind of just looking at this initial part of the slate. Strategy-wise, we thought it was a good idea to look at this one from a value standpoint. There are some really cheap options in this game, both sides that have let us down repeatedly, but they're so cheap. And with the pricing on this particular slate, you'll notice they jacked up the prices of a lot of different guys. Now, I like tighter pricing. Gives you more of an edge. It doesn't allow you to mindlessly just click in the top options who are all underpriced and then just, flip a coin basically with the rest of the field. You actually have to build a competent lineup. The stars and scrubs type builds get really punished hardcore on these types of slates, which I really like. So with this UCF Oklahoma State game, we do have 3 or 4 options that we can look at. Now, by no means am I sitting here saying we need to play 3 or 4 guys from this. We want to save PMR for later. This is an all-day slate. The best way to handle these, and we usually get these on Sunday, is to save PMR for the middle and later parts of the slate, because inevitably what's going to happen is we have the injury news that we know about, but there's also going to be something that pops up that we weren't expecting. Somebody has the flu. Somebody got hurt in warm-up. Somebody got benched. Somebody had bad grades. Something's going to pop up, and it's going to be like, wow, this is a big-time swap we can make. Half the field already burned 90% of their PMR. This is a big opportunity. So we don't want to get stuck rostering a major stack for Oklahoma State UCF. And this game is not going to be particularly fantasy friendly anyway. So that would be a really big mistake overall. With that being said, UCF is definitely the team that I want to look at here. Now, they are coming off a 79-77 nice road victory over TCU. They did play Oklahoma State back on February 28th. They did get a win on the road there, 77-71. In that one, Darius Johnson had 15 and 5. Shamari Allen had 14 and 4. Jalen Sellers had 12 and 2. Now, Sellers is the first player I want to talk about on this particular matchup. Surprise, surprise. I am a pretty big Jalen Sellers fan overall. Now, as all the guys who got jacked up horrendously, and we're going to be talking about Cincinnati because we just stacked them very tough against West Virginia and it worked well, but they're all priced up. Jalen Sellers is not. At 5'4", we know he's going to play 30-plus minutes. He's going to take double-digit shots. He doesn't give us a ton when it comes to those secondary stats, such as rebounds, assists, blocks, steals. He's going to have to score, and he's going to have to score a lot to still pay this off. He did foul out in that TCU game in 32 minutes, but still playing over 30 minutes. Now, Sellers in the non-con was a big-time fantasy asset, and he comes over from Ball State, where he was the absolute alpha of that team. I thought it was a weird fit for him to come to UCF, and I didn't believe in him at first, and I didn't think he was going to have a particularly great season with this team. And there was a few games early on in which he just blew the slate up, and I didn't want to buy into it, and I didn't believe in it. And he was delivering some pretty big performances, 35, 40, 50 earlier in the season against Stetson. The Stetson Hatters, who are in the tournament for the first time ever, by the way. And he's been really, really good. In conference play, that hasn't necessarily been the case, but we're not talking about him being priced up at $7K like he was a month and a half ago. Now we're getting a very nice price of 5.4. I think he is the most viable option from this game. He does have a shot rate of nearly 27%, which is highest on the team. He's only shooting 30% from long range, but there is major value there, 160 attempts. 23% usage rate, and he's playing 79% of the available minutes, which is second on the team just behind the great Darius Johnson. Everything else about him is fairly mediocre. He does draw 4.5 fouls per 40, but again, assist rate, rebounding rate, all that stuff is non-existent. It's kind of borderline. Now, with the way pricing is on DraftKings this year, we've said, usually in the past, values are sub 5K options. That's just the way I've always looked at it for the past decade, and most people did as well. With the way pricing is now, we've kind of moved value range into the 5 to like 5.9 range as well, extending that out just because of how the pricing had been tighter earlier in the season. Been loose lately, but now we're getting back to business here. So 5.4 is definitely a value piece here for Sellers, and he can get hot and score 20 real points and essentially pay that off, hitting a couple of threes. And it's not as if he's going to give us 0 when it comes to those peripheral stats. He's going to give us something, maybe an assist or two, maybe a rebound or two, maybe he swipes it. He's going to get something there. It's just we have to get that 15-plus real points from him to actually get that value and make it. Only 14.5 fantasy points last time against Oklahoma State. Did have some early foul trouble, but he took 10 shots. The volume was there. The volume's going to be there again. I'm not worried about that. Now, this is going to be what I believe is a lower scoring slate because of how tight the pricing is. And some of these matches are just atrocious, but there are, on day one of P5 tournaments, as you can imagine, some juicy fantasy-friendly options as well. And they're going to be a ton on the later slate as well. So you don't have to stuff in Jalen Sellers early if you don't want to. If you're uncomfortable with that move, I understand that. I wouldn't blame you one bit. Now, because of the rates for his total season and how many minutes I'm expecting him to have, he's going to project absolutely bonkers. So when you see the sheet in the morning at 32 minutes, he's going to be right around 4.6 to nearly 5x. No surprise there. Maybe you need to temper expectations. I get it. Now, his counterpart, Darius Johnson, is a whole hell of a lot more expensive at 8K. Doesn't project nearly as well from a return standpoint, but he is at 35 minutes, about 3.8x. If you want to pay up for Johnson and be a little contrarian, which I believe that will be, that makes a lot of sense, especially if you're going to draw some additional lineups here, large field stuff. Darius Johnson makes a lot of sense there. Does essentially make up the total alpha of this team for sure. Now, we do have a little bit of love here for Shamari Allen. Comes in right in between those two at 6'3". He had a pretty solid outing last time. He's not a player that I'm trying to think back this entire season with UCF. I don't believe I've rostered him even one time this whole year. The 6'3" price that they bumped him up to is probably a little bit too much, but he is going to be playing 30-plus minutes as well, and he is kind of the opposite of Jalen Sellers. He's going to give us a handful of peripherals, 5-6 assists, 3 or 4 rebounds, steals, blocks. He's probably not going to score more than 7 or 8 real points. If you made Allen and Sellers into one human being, that would be a hell of a player. They would be the total package. But with them separate, both are kind of mediocre on their own, but because of Sellers' discount, that's where I want to go. When it comes to front court options on UCF, it's even more impossible to try and figure out and feel good about. Typically, CJ Walker starts, plays about 20 to 25 minutes. Ibrahim Diallo, about 20 to 25 minutes, although he played 27. And then you have Tierno Silva, Marcellus Avery, who I love, but it's just lost in the shuffle right now, and Omar Payne, playing 10 to 15 minutes. So that word we like to use a lot in DFS, cannibalization, that's what's happening here with these forwards. Makes none of them that exciting. Diallo's price jumping up to 5.9 is kind of a head scratcher. I can't even imagine paying that. Now, I say that knowing that he'll probably blow up and put up some huge score at 3%. He did have a nice outing last time against TCU in which he put up 24, but to go from 4.5 to 5.9, that's a little bit too much. I'm not interested there. The only forward I would actually use would be CJ Walker at 5'6". He's the one that I trust the most, but he's not that exciting whatsoever. As far as talent goes, and upside, Marcellus Avery is the best, but he's not getting the minutes because everybody on this UCF team is now healthy. If you were to give him 20-plus minutes, he would be an absolute smash. That's not probably going to happen, barring any foul trouble, unless you're going to run 20-plus lineups. I think Sellers is the way to go. On the Oklahoma State side, we do have several cheap options. With Bryce Thompson out for the foreseeable future, it did open up those minutes for Jamyron Keller. Keller was a majorly popular value just last month, early February. He threw down a 36 against BYU, which led to him being extreme chalk against Cincinnati in the following game at just 4.4K, and he delivered another solid outing at 25 fantasy points in 36 minutes. Now, I want to look more at the minutes, less about the production, because the minutes have remained 37, 30, 32, 31, and 38 over the last 5. However, he hasn't eclipsed 20 in any of those games. The closest was against Texas back on March 2nd, in which he had 19.5 fantasy points. Now 19.5 at 4.9, we're feeling pretty good, especially on a slate like this. He's been priced close to 6K for the last few weeks because of that big performance against BYU, and the following performance against Cincinnati hasn't been able to replicate that just yet, but the minutes remain. Keller is a pure on the court play at sub 5K on a slate that doesn't have a ton of feel-good value. The same can be said about Kion Williams. Now, Kion Williams has probably bigger upside, higher upside, I should say, proper English, than Jamyron Keller. The only problem is, just like what happened in the middle part of the season, he was placed into the doghouse, lost his starting gig, fell way below 10 minutes out of necessity because of injuries. He got back in the starting lineup, playing big minutes, producing quite well, but he did end up finding himself in the doghouse the last 2 games. Minutes have been back down, and it's hard to sit here and say that, hey, he's going to play 30-plus minutes. He might, or he might get a turnover, a bad foul, take a bad shot, and immediately go back to the coaching staff's doghouse in which he plays 18 to 19 minutes. So he's only 4.7. Keller's 4.9. I suspect those 2 guys will draw the brunt of the ownership from this game. I personally look to Keller. I know a lot of people would probably go to Kion. He's just really got high upside there at that price if everything is working in his favor and he is not being placed in the quote-unquote doghouse. Now, when you look at rates, nothing that Kion Williams does is particularly great. Sounds kind of mean. 8% offensive rebounding rate. That's solid. Overall, his usage rate is just about 18%. Jamyron Keller has an 18% shot rate, shooting 29% from long range, which isn't great, but he is shot better in conference play, and he's gotten more minutes. A lot of the season, he was just a spot, role player playing 10, 15 minutes at a time. Now we know that we're getting a lot more PT with him, and he is somebody that I trust a little bit more than Kion, at least at this moment. And he gets a fantastic spot here against a UCF team that defensively has been solid all season long, but has fallen apart in that regard, and they have been a much more fantasy-friendly unit over the past 2 weeks. Outside of those cheapies, Javon Small has major slate breaking upside. In the loss to BYU, he had a 46% usage rate, 34 real points, just the only guy on this team that can score with any sort of consistency. Now, he is pretty cheap, all things considering. He was really cheap against BYU, but 7.6 for him, under 8K for a scorer of his magnitude. I do like him quite a bit. I don't know that we'll have the luxury to get there because there is Norchad, there is Quentin Post. Those are two guys that could easily drop 40 against each other that I think we're going to have to prioritize. We have Marcus Burton going up against Georgia Tech, which he is a very safe option. We have Cincinnati. We are running back the Cincinnati stack that was so successful for us for a few days ago against the same West Virginia team, but they're priced up. You have NC State going up against Louisville. DJ Horn, is he in? Is he not? So there's a lot of different ways to look. Javon Small is going to be very low owned, but he could absolutely break the slate and be one of the highest scorers on it at sub 15% ownership. So I definitely want to look in his direction. Overall, 25% usage rate, 27% assist rate, drawing 4.5 fouls per 40. He's making about 37% of his threes. Now, he has another year because of COVID. He spent a couple of seasons at East Carolina. Depending on what happens with Oklahoma State and their, coaching stuff, we might see Small hit the portal one more time, and he'll be a very desirable candidate wherever he ends up if he does not stay with the Cowboys. As far as anyone else goes on this team, I suppose at 5K, another value we could look at is John Michael Wright, who is very reliant on his scoring ability. He has scored 20-plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 4, has made Keller and Kion more of an afterthought. So you have 3 different fantasy values in this game that you can consider. I believe Kion will be one of the more popular. Wright probably makes the most sense, but I'm going to stick with Jameer and Keller. Just have a little bit more of a feel there for him. All right, moving on to the next game here. We have Georgia Tech versus Notre Dame. Notre Dame a 1-point favorite, and it's the lowest total on the board at 131. I do think the over is live simply because Notre Dame, while not the bottom feeder of the conference that I thought they were going to be, it's still pretty bad, but Louisville owned that, of course. They do finish 12-19 here under Micah Shrewsbury, but they've been pretty competitive here lately, beating Clemson at home, beating Wake Forest at home. They did beat Georgia Tech earlier in the season, 58-55 at home, and beat them in overtime at their place, 75-68 back in January. So they are 2-0 against Georgia Tech. It's hard to beat a team 3 times. I know it's cliche to say that. Everybody says it, but that is going to be something that I'm thinking about here from a betting standpoint. But from a DFS production standpoint, Marcus Burton makes an absolute ton of sense. Number 1 usage rate in the conference at 33%, number 1 shot rate at 32.2%, and the second highest assist rate in the ACC at 37.6%. And if that's not enough, the second highest steal rate at 4%, playing 85% of the available minutes, and that's good for top 10 in the conference as well. The freshman doesn't get enough love from not only the industry itself, but the college basketball world. You rarely see anyone outside of that program's fans or maybe ACC beats talking about Marcus Burton, but he's a very safe option. Yes, he's a little bit expensive here against this Georgia Tech team at 8-4, but it's also Georgia Tech, and lead guards, just lead options in general, have absolutely postered this Georgia Tech team time and time again. So if we're valuing raw points and safety, Marcus Burton's name has to be considered, even at the 8-4 price point. Put up 36 against them in that close win back on Valentine's Day, if you remember that. And then going back to the game on the 9th against Georgia Tech there in the overtime win, he had 28. Not as great there. That would be probably a disaster at 8-4. But again, I don't know that we're going to have a ton of high scores for this slate. So him dropping a 30 is probably still going to be enough. And at the very least, he's going to take 15 to 20 shots. 15 plus shots in 4 of his last 5 games alone. And you know what? He used to be just a 3-point chucker, at least early on, but he's driving to the rack and he's getting to the foul line a lot. A lot of his points lately have come from the foul line. This game being close down at the end, the prior 2 have. 1 even went to overtime. What does that mean? We got to stop the clock. We got to foul somebody. Marcus Burton could end up racking up those points late, the last 2 or 3 minutes when it turns into a foul game, which I know most fans hate, but DFS players like us love because it gives our guys an opportunity to rack up points. So I do like Marcus Burton here, and I think he'll be a little bit underowned for a slate that this only 5 games. As far as anyone else outside of Burton, it gets a little bit dicey here. Braden Shrewsbury is interesting at 6K. Coach Son, he's taken a ton of shots. That's the main thing he has going for him. Tate Davis has gotten quite expensive at 6'8". Again, that's a weird spot because he's so highly priced, but he gets a matchup against Georgia Tech that if he can get through Bayandongo and get some foul trouble onto him, he's going to be completely unchecked in the paint and rack up a ton of points. And he's played really well. 25 plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 5 games. I've been waiting for Tay Davis to kind of, wake up and start to realize some of his great potential. And that is starting to happen now. We're seeing some really good production out of him, which includes a 17-6 game against Georgia Tech in their last meeting for 28.5 fantasy points. The Notre Dame rotation is a little bit lackluster. They've gone through some changes in the starting 5. They've gone to various options, trying to find something that works next to Davis and Burton. Right now, they're starting Braden Shrewsbury, Tay Davis, Marcus Burton, Kerry Booth, and Keba and Jai. And we're seeing Julian Roper, Logan Imes, and Matt Zona as the main bench pieces. J.R. Coe, he was starting early in the season. Now he is barely playing at all. I do like Kerry Booth a little bit here for the same reasons as Tay Davis, just because he would be able to take advantage of any front court inefficiencies that Georgia Tech would have, or if they get into foul trouble, but they have jacked his price up to 6.5 as well. And now you're starting to get a sense of where we stand with this slate with all these whacked out prices. It's going to be very, very tight in terms of pricing and roster construction. Now on the Georgia Tech side, Bayandongo has been absolutely fantastic. A real true revelation this season for a Georgia Tech team that, has their moments under Coach Stoudemire. They're obviously going to take some more time. They were 14-17 this season, but I did see some really competitive games out of them, and there were a few flips that they probably should have won or could have won if those games got reran. Miles Kelly leads the team in usage at 25% and shot rate at 27%. But looking at Ndongo, he is absolutely solid as well. And worth the salary if you want to go to him, because Notre Dame's front court, while it has some exciting younger options like Booth and Davis, neither of them are super efficient or stout when it comes to defensive responsibilities, and they can get burned, especially picking up stupid fouls or just getting boxed out by a much stronger veteran type player. Now, Ndongo's only a freshman, but he plays a lot older than he actually is. And if you watch any Georgia Tech games, you'll find yourself looking at him thinking that he's been a 4-year starter with the way he plays. I love Ndongo and the way that he's really come up this year. As far as his rates, 24% usage rate, 22% shot rate, combined rebounding rate of 33%, and a block rate sitting over 4.5% as well. Again, it's an expensive option at 7.3. There is safety with him in that number. He just put up a solid 21-9 against Virginia, 9-11 against Wake Forest, and 15-14 against Florida State. He's absolutely dominating the glass. His last meeting against Notre Dame, he had 24. I think we see him put up a much bigger number, assuming he can stay out of foul trouble here on the neutral court. And then he did have 34 against Notre Dame way back in the overtime loss that was in early January. I also have a little bit of love here for Tafara Gapare. I liked his upside. Now he's priced at 5.7. It's a little bit more expensive than I would ever really truly consider paying for him. But this matchup, this spot, this slate, I think he is certainly worthy of a roster consideration, whether that is an alt build or into your main ultimately. Now, this is probably more of a GPP look here because there is such a wide range of outcomes, but we have seen him deliver on some monstrous performances. He has a solid overall block rate, strong rebounding rates. Now, his block rate's 7%, which is top 70 in the country, over 20% combined rebounding rate, and getting more minutes, starting to travel in the right direction there. Gapare, definitely an intriguing option there in non-Ndongo lineups. You have some value here if you're not going to use Ndongo or Miles Kelly, who is cheap enough at 6.5 to consider, definitely. Kwesi Reeves. That's probably my favorite option, and that kind of plays into the conversation I was having with Varn earlier. These first 2 games, they're kind of yucky, for lack of a better term, but there's values getting minutes, consistent, safe minutes that we can look at. Kwesi Reeves is definitely one of those guys here at 4.8. Has been a little bit, sporadic with his production just because we are seeing Kyle Sturdivant play, more minutes. That's kind of hurt Reeves, right? We're seeing Nathan George. He emerged as a young, player this year, but he's kind of gone up and down as you would expect a first and second year player to do. And a lot of that has hurt Reeves overall, but I think he settled into this nice 20 to 25 minute role with upside for more. in the conference tournament here, win or go home. They're going to have to play him a lot more minutes, and he's going to be out there barring any sort of foul trouble. He does have a shot rate of 20%, and he's one of the best three-point shooters on the team next to Kyle Sturdivant at 39%, and on major volume, 132 attempts. I think Reeves is one of those sneakier values where maybe people won't necessarily look there just because we've seen Sturdivant and some of the other guys play better, especially recently. But you only have to look back a couple of games to Miami in which he blew up for 15 and 8 on his way to 27.5 to see in the right environment. He has major upside, and this is definitely the right environment. He put up 21 fantasy points against Notre Dame in their prior matchup at 4-8. We would love that. That's totally fine. And he also put up 21 against them in his first matchup. Took 11 shots against them there, only made 3. Obviously, nice volume. Took 6 against them in their last meeting, made 3 there as well. I think Quasi Reeves is a value that we can put on our main lineups and feel pretty good about it as we head to some of the more juicier spots on the later part of the slate. All right, moving on here to the next one. What is up? We've got the NC State super fan here, Alex. Don't call him that, though. Call him Aquasaw. That is saying Georgia Tech East path to the ACC title, or easy. Yeah, easy. You even fixed that. Easiest path to ACC title game. Yeah, I think that you might be right there. Just has to beat, Wake Forest. And yeah, they're the UNC Killers. So maybe Tech makes a little bit of run here. That would be cool, wouldn't it? Just seeing some bottom feeder team make it to the title game there and beyond. But obviously that would knock out Indiana State and some of these other more beloved mid-majors that we want to see. By the way, Gonzaga has gone final 89-77. Interesting how that played out. San Fran is now out. Gonzaga will meet St. Mary's for the WCC final, as if any other outcome was even possible. All right, next game on the slate here, we have West Virginia at Cincinnati, or against Cincinnati, I should say, on the neutral. We just had this game. Over the weekend, March 9th, Saturday. That was the one in which, it didn't want to get too cute. We had a pretty nice slate overall. Nobody really rostered the Cincinnati guys, which was kind of odd, right? Like Skillings obviously was pretty chalky coming back after missing a game because he was cheap, but it's the West Virginia, one of the more fantasy-friendly groups in the Big 12 in terms of their defense or lack of defense. And I was very adamant about playing that Cincy stack. Now, it was led by the chalky Dan Skillings, whether he started or not. Odi Agawama started because of the senior day thing, played 3 minutes, no problem. We got Skillings to 28 minutes, was fine. John Newman, who I felt was an excellent option there and had the guard forward eligibility, came through with the big 14, 6 and 4, 2 steals. 7 of 7 on 2-point field goals. He was fantastic. Day Thomas had 5 steals, 7 assists, 6 rebounds, 7 points. He was also fantastic. And Seamus Lukosius, he got over 20 fantasy points as well. Jizzle James played 22. Wasn't that great with 8 points and 3 rebounds, but still played over 20 minutes. And now we're walking into this spot here. Total of 144. Since he is 10.5-point favorites, I think West Virginia is probably going to be rather listless. And there's going to be the strategy here you're going to have to play it. If Cincy gets out in front by a big margin, will they be sitting their guys early to try and, maintain energy for the next round? Perhaps. But I did like what Mike Randall said this morning on his show that, these tired legs and all that, like they're college kids at the end of the day. These are athletes. They play every day anyways. Like, I just don't necessarily buy into that either, especially this early in the tournament. The only thing you really have to worry about there with tired legs is if it's like the 3rd or 4th game in a row and they're primarily 3-point shooters that are coming out flat. Your guys that are working down low or driving to the hoop, they're just going to generate fouls and get to the foul line and all that good stuff. So I'm not necessarily worried about guys getting pulled here, but there is a potential for maybe a few minutes to get shaved off the top. With that being said, the prices of Cincinnati have all skyrocketed since Saturday, and I definitely think they deserve to because of how they played, but some of these prices are astronomically high. I would have loved to have gone right back to Day Thomas. That was an absolute smash hit that we got on. He did have 5 steals, admittedly, but 35 fantasy points at 6'3". Now we're talking about 7'9". That's the highest price he's ever been. I don't know that we can get there. Again, it's a fantastic spot. No reason to think he can't rack up more steals against this team, more overall peripherals. He put up 26 against them in a prior meeting to Saturday, and he's been an absolute strong option here the last 3 games, 8+ shots in 3 straight games, and he has been filling up the stat line. He has 11 steals in the past 3 games as well, but 7.9 is an absolute astronomical price. I don't know that we can get there. When you look at the other options around him, our guy Mo Diarra, he's expensive as well. Matthew Cleveland, just a few hundred less. And it's only 300 or 400 more for Norchad Omier and Quinton Post. When you put it like that, are we really going to be able to play Day Thomas, who I do like in this spot, over somebody like Norchad Omier? Now, I know different positions, whatever, but we're talking about as far as your pay-ups go, you're going to want to probably play 2 on this slate, more if you can. I don't know that you can make that justification, but I do like Day Thomas. And knowing he will have minuscule ownership, the Cincy stack in GBP makes way too much sense once again. I feel like the Q winner for this one will have 2 or 3 Cincy players once more. Dan Skillings is a core lock. Now, his price has come up a bit at 7-1, but he plays so much like Terry Eason, and he's just like coasting into these 30 fantasy point games. Like him for more, but 4X solid. Sign me up. I'm locked in. I'm all over it. Whether he starts or not, Dan Skillings is going in my lineup confidently. Aziz Bandiago at 7K. That's a little bit too high price. Foul issues galore. Not really playing huge minutes. He does have to share time. Even with Victor Locken having the questionable tag once again, it seems rather likely he will miss. And even if he plays, he may be limited. And even with that being out, or with Locken being out, we're seeing Jameel Reynolds split time with Bandiago. We're seeing Josh Reed play a little bit out of position. We're seeing Oguyama a little bit. We're seeing Skillings play the 4. Like, there's just a lot of different options here, and it's preventing Aziz from playing 30+ minutes. Now, it is the tournament time. Maybe they play him a little bit more, but on the same token, it's 7K. Matchup's great, but opportunity on the floor, maybe not such a good thing. If Locken plays, then it makes it even worse to try and fit Aziz Bandiago. And for that token, they priced Victor Locken at 6K. I don't think so. Am I going to go back to John Newman, who we had a lot of over the weekend? I am. He's priced only 300 more from where he was. That is the most viable one on the team, not named Dan Skillings, just because we know that opportunity is going to be there, whether Locken plays or not. Now, Locken being out helps him a lot because he's playing more minutes at the 4 and a little bit out of position, but his rebounding numbers are going up, and he's just contributing at a much higher level. Really like John Newman in this spot once again, and I think people are going to roster him because of that guard forward eligibility. It gives you a cheap forward, and people will look at those game logs and see he's hit 30+ in 2 of his last 3 games. But remember, we're not chasing him because we were in on him early, as in last Saturday, and he performed quite well for us. The Jizzle James price is a bit ridiculous at 6'2". Now, he did play 22 minutes. It's, he's been getting that playing time off the bench, fairly safe in that regard, but a 1K price increase, and he's only hit 20+ in once of the last 5 games. That's pretty tough. With that being said, everybody in the world's going to write him off and not use him. That's a perfect GPP spot. DFS gods, they are real. Rest assured. Want to mess with us some more? Jizzle James will throw down a 40 here at 1%, but you're not using him in your main regardless of matchup there. They would take some guys being out for us to really elevate him to a level in which we could play him in our main builds. And then that leaves Seamus Lukosius at 6'2", also has guard forward eligibility. You're basically paying for him to get you right around 3.5, 4X. He's playing a ton of minutes. He's not the most efficient scorer, not the most consistent when it comes to peripherals, but he is definitely a solid option at 6'2". And in the mix, if you want to stack Cincy and you can't get to Day Thomas this time, you could take Day out of that 3-man stack we run on Saturday and play Seamus into that spot and still feel pretty good about it with Skillings, Sheemish, and Newman. If you only want to play 1, it's Skillings. If you're able to play 2, Skillings and Newman, makes it pretty easy here. West Virginia is just an elite matchup. We will not have them on the slates anymore after they get eliminated here, which is a shame, but one more slate to knock them around. We need to take advantage of it. As far as West Virginia plays, Ray Battle, it's a neutral court, so perhaps we can use my man Ray Battle, high usage scoring machine. He's not great on the road. We know that. On the neutral court, we'll see. He's only 6'4". It's a solid price for him in a tourney setting. I expect him to take 15 to 20 shots. The realistic option that we can use in our main will be Jesse Edwards, who's priced there at 7-7. Now, he absolutely detonated against TCU, just a monster 60 bomb. Priced him at 8-5, which was a bit ludicrous. He ended up with foul trouble on the road again since he didn't play too well. It is a 7-7 price point. Again, there are several guys in that option. You have some decisions to make. Omir and Post are to me, the best plays on the slate in terms of payups. So I'm probably not going to get to Jesse Edwards, but he does make a lot of sense here, and he is obviously the best fantasy asset this team has to offer. Great rates across the board. No foul trouble means he can put up a huge number here against anyone, especially against a possible Victor Lock-and-List Cincinnati Bearcats team. As far as anybody else on West Virginia, I'm not trying to get cute here. Kirk Reese is there at 5-1. Not that interested. You saw him have a big game against Kansas State a few weeks ago. You see the downside of what he did in 32 minutes against Cincinnati, 6 fantasy points. No, thank you. I'm not going there at 5-1. If people want to use him as a value, by all means, go for it. Quinn Slazinski is kind of interesting at 5-4, not really that much. And then you have some separate values here, like a Noah Farrakhan, who I could see play 20-plus minutes here for his offense. Patrick Sumanik, who did play 22 minutes against Cincinnati, and only put up 4.5 fantasy points. That's hard to do, but he did it. He did show some upside without Jesse Edwards. With Jesse Edwards, he's been more of an afterthought, but I do think we could see him play a few more minutes than normal as well at nearly min price. You could probably do a little bit worse there in a large field GPP setting. All right, moving on to the next game here. Louisville versus NC State. Total of 148.5. Now, this is the highest total on the slate. Usually we're used to these first round games in the conference tournaments of the Big Five being like 160 plus and just these super fast teams and no defense playing. So it's kind of some anti-barn burner-esque games here. But with NC State being a 9-point favorite, kind of shows us that Horn's probably going to play. We'll see. Officially coming into this one as questionable / game time decision, dealing with the hip issue. It did cost him against Pittsburgh. Now, without him, we saw Jaden Taylor step in and just take over and looked absolutely fantastic. And he is the one, right away, hey, what are we going to get Jaden Taylor at if there's no DJ Horn? Like, he's been priced below 5K, below 6K. Let's get after it. What did he do against Pittsburgh when he came in? He dropped 28 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, knocked down 5 triples. He looks absolutely phenomenal and really was the only reason they were in that game to begin with. 32% usage rate. But DK on their shiz priced him up to 7-3 from 5-8. It's a real decision. Now, the nice thing is Taylor has finally been playing the way I think most of us that played DFS thought he could, especially Alex there. We talk about Jaden Taylor a lot. 36 against Florida State, 25 against North Carolina. Throw out the Duke game because he didn't play that much. And then that 47 against Pittsburgh. In a win-or-go-home setting here, I think Taylor is a nice play. The higher price at 7-3, I like it because it makes people get away from him. They're going to have to really work to get there. That's another one where you have to decide, hey, Day Thomas, Jaden Taylor, both of these guys are in a great situation. They're priced up, though. Can we really pay that price? And I think majority of the industry will say no. So you can get some really nice leverage with a player like this Jaden Taylor, especially going up against a punchless Louisville team that I don't suspect will put up a huge fight here against the Wolfpack. They might, but I don't know if I see that happening. And maybe it doesn't matter if Horn plays or not. And maybe they take that opportunity to get him some rest. Again, there is no tomorrow, though, so what can you really rest him? I think the worst-case scenario and what will likely happen is Horn plays and is limited and ends up playing a lot of empty minutes, acting as what we say a lot in college football, a higher-priced decoy type of player. So we'll see how that shakes out. Jaden Taylor at 7-3 without Horn becomes kind of a no-brainer for me. If Horn plays, it's kind of tougher. If Taylor were not to start, I don't think I could really get there. If he starts, then I'm okay with it. We love Mo Diarra. He has been phenomenal for us since the new year got to 2024. Minutes are up. He's playing as the alpha front court option. Finally, he has deserved this role for a very long time, but that is such a high price at 8K. I don't think we can get there. Against Louisville, anything is possible. We could see an absolute monstrous score. He only needed 18.5 minutes against Louisville in their first matchup to put up 26 fantasy points. with him playing potentially 30 to 33 like he's been doing, he can absolutely put this slate on its head. I'm still treading a little bit lightly with some of this stuff here, but Diarra, fantastic overall block and rebounding rates, and he can score a little bit. The most expensive player on the Wolfpack, who would have thought coming into the season, Alex, that it would be Mo Diarra as an 8K option? Not me, certainly. DJ Burns there at 6'6". I don't think he's this is the kiss of death. Now, we talk about jinxes a lot. We're superstitious. If you ever come into the FTN CBB Discord, you'll see us talking some pretty wild, superstitious stuff. Like, I'm a pretty big believer. I got jade rocks and I got, crystals. I got all kinds of weird stuff. Like, I'm a big superstitious guy. Like, if I have a big win one night, like, I will go and do almost the same routine the next night. I know it's borderline stupid and psychotic behavior, but that's just the way it is. And if you played sports growing up, you had some kind of superstition that you utilized. Anyways, I don't find that I jinx too many players. That designation goes to Adam Young, our very fine editor and wonderful young man that he is in the FTN Discord. He's the jinx. We're working on it. We're getting him away from the jinx. He's been playing quite well lately. With that being said, there is one player in particular that I have a habit of ensuring goes completely bonkers, and it is one DJ Burns, because when his price rises like this, he doesn't project very well. He doesn't look very good in the matchups, and I just don't find myself wanting to get there, especially with other options there and his minutes, usually below 20 or foul trouble, whatever it may be. When I say that DJ Burns not an option, easy fade, he goes on to have these ballistic performances. So if you're superstitious like I am, and we are as a community, you may want to get some exposure to DJ Burns here, because I do not think he is a very good play overall. Love DJ Burns, but the Pack are obviously better when they're spreading it out. We saw on senior night against Duke, they kept feeding him over and over and over and over again. That resulted in a 79-64 loss. Trading twos for threes isn't necessarily advisable, especially if the other team is allowing that post player to get to the rack each and every time. And it's not as if they were allowing him to score, but they were letting the entry pass in, and once he got it down low, it was a wrap. I don't foresee Louisville doing that, but also they don't have the discipline to defend Burns. So if they want to exploit a matchup, we could see Burns go ballistic. But if the Wolfpack want to win, they're going to have to spread it out a little bit more here, unless Louisville just comes in completely laying down, which is very, very possible. Other values that we have, I do like Michael O'Connell. He's pretty solid overall, not a big-time scorer, doesn't have great usage rates, but he does contribute in other categories. Be a tick priced up here at 5.2, but we are having very, very few values with everybody priced up, so in that conversation at the very least. Casey Morsell at 6'1". Nope, still not rostering Casey Morsell. And Ben Middlebrooks, who sits there at 5'1". Minutes have gone down recently. Foul trouble against Pittsburgh is the main reason, and then against Duke, watching the DJ Burns show. Hard to say what minutes he will actually get here, but 20-ish seems safe, going up against a Louisville team that he can definitely beat up on. He's not that cheap at 5'1". 4'1" is what maybe we would expect normally, but with the DK tighter pricing, it does make it a slightly more difficult to feel good about someone like Ben Middlebrooks. Now, with Louisville, we have cheap prices across the board. Now, I don't necessarily, and I don't treat NC State as a team like I have to avoid targeting against them by any means. They have been solid defensively at times, and we're talking about a Louisville team that is just very unappealing from top to bottom. But somebody here is definitely going to put up some decent enough numbers that we have to put them into consideration. Now, the starting lineup we saw, let's go to non-senior day game, because Zan Payne got some time. The starting lineup we would normally see, I think, and what we will see is Mike James, Brandon Huntley-Hatfield, Trey White, Caleb Glenn, and Sky Clark, with Tyler Johnson absorbing 25-plus minutes off the bench. Curtis Williams has fallen way, way, way down after playing starter minutes. Now he's barely playing. Zan Payne played 18 minutes 2 games ago. I don't know if that will continue. He also got the start, played 20 minutes against BC on the senior day. But mainly we're looking at a 6, maybe 7-man rotation here with very, very cheap prices overall. Trey White, to me, is extremely interesting at 5'7". He has put up back-to-back games under 10 fantasy points, which will keep his rostership supremely low. But we're talking about a player who was priced at $7K for a lot this season. Younger player, unproven, needs to develop further, but definitely has pop. You saw against Syracuse, took 14 shots. Against Duke, he took 11. I think we see a little bit of a bounce back spot here for Trey White. He is actually my favorite overall Louisville option, and I don't suspect him to get much with any rostership whatsoever. Instead, you have Mike James at 5'8", guard forward eligibility. I think people will be more apt to use him. We've seen upside from him in the past. Or Tyler Johnson, who intermittently starts, and if he comes off the bench, he's playing starter minutes, priced there at 5'6". All of those options bunched up. You can use any of them, and you can look at Sky Clark too at 5'5". I do think you want one of those four, and it's personal preference at that. For me, it's Trey White. Others may want to play Sky Clark, who has a scoring ability that's at least interesting here against NC State. And he did play 32 minutes against Boston College. That's huge if we get him into the 30-minute range. So really, any of those four can be used. I wouldn't advise stacking them, but one to get yourself some flexibility within your lineup and salary savings makes a lot of sense. You do have Caleb Glenn at 5'2". If he can stay out of foul trouble against that NC State front court, he's at least interesting at 5'2". He doesn't have a high fantasy point per minute number by any means, but we have seen him at least lately find a way to stay out of foul trouble to a degree, and that has been a huge difference in his playing time, and he's actually putting up fairly consistent numbers, at least from a 3.5x standpoint, which I know isn't value, but fairly close there when we have limited options available to us. And then that leaves Brandon Huntley-Hatfield, who has been the best player on the team, 7'5". I don't think I'm getting there at 7'5". It would be very shocking to me if he put up a huge score. He did have 13 and 10 against NC State in one of their prior matchups for 30, but he's not priced in the 6K range like I would have expected him to be. He's just a little bit too high for me, and you're seeing this is another one of those plays where it's like, yes, 25 fantasy points seems logical, but the opportunity cost is high there. What am I really getting at 7.5 for Huntley-Hatfield against NC State, an NC State team that may be motivated to win some games here against a Louisville team that may be looking to just pack it up and call it a season. All right, last game on this early slate is going to be Miami versus BC. Hey, Jimi Hendrix. Hello, Frank. Can you talk the early game? I was thinking about taking one of the teams in the AM. Should I? Yeah. Is he? Are you the betting my betting friend that has been hanging out with me all season? I think you must have changed your name. But if you're looking for the lock bet of the day, I'll have you. I got you at the end of the show, my friend. All right, last game here, Boston College versus Miami, Florida. Total of 147. Miami 2-point favorites. This is going to be a big-time bet from me on Boston College. I mean, Miami, when a lot of disappointment talk is going on, like, who are the most disappointing teams of the season, players, all that. Like, it's just that time of year. We're wrapping up the regular season. We're into conference tournaments. Awards are coming out. We even had that discussion in our Discord a few weeks ago. And a lot of people will say, Miami's just so disappointing. But to me, I don't know that can actually be the case. Yes, they're disappointing, but the most disappointing team, I think that might be a little bit harsh, considering the fact that they have rarely had their full roster available to them. They're already light, like on depth. Their bench isn't great even when healthy. And then you talk about, Matthew Cleveland missing time here. Norchad Omier missed some time. Nigel Pax in and out of lineup. Poplar missed time. Keyshawn George. I mean, everybody on this team that's relevant has missed time. And that has led to a abysmal February into March for Miami. They've won just one game since February 3rd. It's just been a really bad season for Larinaga and Miami. And while we all suspected they would be better, we also suspected that they would be healthy, and they're not. The first question we're going to have to decide on here, and this game starts at 3:45 PST on the West Coast, and that's DK start time, not necessarily when it starts. We will need that NC State game to end approximately between 3:15 and 3:30. And I know a lot of people are confused on time zones, so I'll say it in East Coast time for you guys. Not that no one's not intelligent or anything, just I know time zones can be tricky. So 4:15 is when that will start on the East Coast. If that ends around 6:30ish, I think we're probably good in terms of we'll have starting lineups available to us. And at the very least, even if we don't have the full starters out yet, there'll be some warming up happening. There'll be somebody reporting on it there. There'll be plenty of reporters and beats there. They got to do their job. And we'll be able to tell, is Nigel Pack dressed and warming up? Not dressed out. Please retire the term dressed out, all of you beats. But is he warming up? Is he dressed? And is he, starting, obviously? But we'll get that news on, of course, I'm talking about Nigel Pack, who is priced at 4.5K. If he is available, he'll be chalk. If he's starting, he'll be mega chalk. If we have no designation, no news at all, we might see kind of split ownership there. So it'll be a little bit tricky. Now, Pack was really cheap going into the last time they played BC, which was just last week at 5.7. He had about 20% ownership, was about 20% lower than I thought it would be at 5.7. And he got injured again, re-aggravating the knee, only played 14 minutes, an absolute disaster. So even if Pack goes here, we're going to have to play him at 4 or 5, but it's unfortunate because it's really, really suspect for his knee to hold up, and we could very easily get re-aggravated on not only that existing injury, but a new one. Because what happens when you're favoring an injury or playing through, especially on a leg or an arm, you tend to, not put a lot of weight on that or not put stress on that injury, right? So then you're overstressing another body part, the other leg perhaps, and that can lead to new injuries. So I'm really nervous about Nigel Pack. Even if he plays and starts, how effective is he actually going to be? Now, this slate doesn't have a ton of value where we can sit here and be like, I feel great about this sub 5K or sub 4K option. So I guess for me, the best situation would be, or for us would be Nigel Pack news coming out very late, close to the game lock, and he's available but not starting, because then people will have to take a shot one way or another. If he's not starting, I'm personally going to make the decision and be full transparent right now. If he doesn't start, I'm not playing him. We have gone way too many times with normal starters not starting, biting us in the ass. It's just not the way you want to play this. Unless we get a definitive, he's not going to start, but Larnag expects him to play 30 minutes. We're not going to be spoon-fed like that, but if we were, then okay, I'll take Nigel Pack if he doesn't start. That's not starting and no news. If he's not starting and we have news, then that changes things. It is the last game on the slate. That makes it tricky, obviously. Make sure you're locked in the Discord, close to lock time. We had Julian Reese yesterday was a scratch. The chat posted it. I had my ruffian youngest toddler child nearly broke his arm yesterday. He didn't, thankfully, but that took me away from the Discord. Some people would have missed that, but they posted it. Our community had my back, thankfully. And that was one of those situations where, hey, close to lock in a game, whether there's an injury designation or not, and Reese didn't have any of that coming in, you just got to check before each game lock. You can't be negligent. If you're playing this time of year and you're putting any amount of money into these contests, do not do yourself a disservice. Come to the Discord, come to our site, check the news that we provide, or at the very least, go to Twitter and type in a name. That's like the bare minimum that you can do. There's a lot more than that goes into this and other sites and message boards, but that is something that you got to do if you're going to play. So case in point with Julian Reese of Maryland just yesterday. So with Nigel Pack, if he starts, we play him. If he doesn't, then we'll find other value. We're probably going to have to, I think the best way to do this is build without him, and then you can swap into him. It's a lot easier to swap down than it is to swap up. You're going to have multiple players available, which I think most people will, because Miami BC is clearly the best environment on the slate. So we'll have to play it that way. But there isn't an easy swap from Pack to like Keyshawn George because it is 1,300. So it's still going to be a two-player swap there, which is why I'm saying you can swap down rather easy and just leave salary on the table if you have to. Otherwise, you're like swapping from Pack to like Prince of Ligby or Donald Hand, and I don't think that that's going to be the move. As far as anyone else on the Miami side, clearly have to target multiple. It starts at Norchad Omier for me, who's priced at just the low 8K range, 8.2. He is an absolute lock here. Last time against BC, he did have a pretty mediocre game. He got off to a slow start, had some fouls. 10 points, 13 rebounds, put up 31. Now, a mediocre game for Norchad Omier is 30 fantasy points. That just shows you how great his upside is. And he followed that up with a road matchup against FSU in which he had 17 rebounds and 16 points, put up a near 50. That's what Norchad can do. He has phenomenal rates. He's highly efficient, great offensive rating. This is just way too cheap of a price for Omier. He can shoot threes. He's versatile. Very tough for anyone to defend. Love Norchad Omier. I suspect everybody loves Norchad Omier on this slate, and he should be very highly owned. If he's not 60% or higher owned, then that's a huge gift to the rest of us for those that are fading, or by those that are fading. GPP-wise, Matthew Cleveland makes sense there. It's a bit expensive at 7.7. He doesn't warrant that price for me, but limited options elsewhere on this team, so he's got to be in play for that reason. I do think Wooga Poplar is main team viable at 6'9", sub 7K. He hasn't been horrific. He wasn't great against FSU, but he's been fairly steady, turning in a mid-20s fantasy score. His shooting has been all over the place, but that volume is still there. 6'9" is a great price to me for him, especially when you have Bensley Joseph sitting there at 6'8", who has played well. He's taken these extra minutes and opportunities with Pack on the sidelines and ran with them, and you see he's taking a ton of shots lately. But I'm still antsy about paying this higher prices for Bensley Joseph. I'd still rather play for Wooga Poplar. He's shown it to us more consistently and longer than Bensley Joseph has. Joseph mainly has to hit his shots, although his peripherals game has stepped up. That's just a really tough spot for me to sit here and say, yeah, Bensley Joseph over, Matthew Cleveland and Wooga Poplar. That's the move. It just to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And if Pack is out, then Keyshawn George would expect him to play 30 plus. He's a fouler, unfortunately, still unrefined as a younger player. We know his upside. He put up 42 against Georgia Tech. We know his downside. He put up sub 15 against Boston College in their last outing. And in their first BC matchup, he fouled out as major chalk. I remember this well. He fouled out in 15 minutes, 1.5 fantasy points. Absolutely dreadful performance for Keyshawn George. He's cheap at 5'8", has to be in consideration, but there is just some drawbacks here. And I think in a tournament setting, there may be some nerves for him as well. He's going to be phenomenal next year, though. Please believe. As far as anyone else, if Pack's out, who can you use? Christian Watson has missed a couple of games, so that leaves Paul Dijabet, who's near min price, to play 10 to 15 minutes without Pack. We've seen Ja'Kai Robinson absorb minutes. He's actually probably one of my favorites, but he's only going to be getting 10 to 15 minutes there if both of those guys were out. He is near min price. You're making some large field GPPs looking for some differentiation type of stuff at 3K. Ja'Kai Robinson could be a guy, and he could actually start there too. He has in the past with some of these guys out. All right, Boston College. It starts once again. Claudel Harris. He was a smash for us against Miami. He has played very, very well against them in 2 games, 13, 9, and 3, 33 fantasy points. He followed that up with a 31 against Louisville, which is why his price has skyrocketed back up. But you go to the first matchup, which was just a few weeks before against Miami in 30 minutes, 15, 9, and 3 for 36 fantasy points. So he has been absolutely uncanny and supreme against this Miami team this year. Love Claudel Harris. Will be back on him once again. And people weren't using him at 5'4". I don't suspect they'll be using him at 6'7". People want to go to Post. People want to go to Norchad, maybe Burton, some of these other guys. Harris isn't going to get rostered, but I'm going to try to live in that mid-range spot as best as I can. And that means Claudel Harris is going to be a core play once again, and he will carry that posh play designation once again. Other options we have here, they're pretty it's easy to figure out because Boston College's depth chart their starting lineup has solidified here, and we've seen some guys fall out of the rotation pretty heavily the last few weeks, and we've seen some injuries to various guys, and Chaz Kelly missing time. So it's really forced guys like Claudel Harris, Jaden Zachary, Mason Madsen to play 30-plus minutes, and those starters all will. And Quentin Post, minus foul trouble, will play over 30 minutes. So it leaves very little for the bench. Prince Aligbe, Elijah Strong, Donald Hannon, Armani Hamidi, none of those guys are interesting, so I'm not looking at them even though they're all cheap, but they're cheap for a reason. Perhaps Prince Aligbe at 3.9 because, he could get closer to 20 minutes. He was a starter before earlier in the season. He's definitely a okay option there as a sub 4K guy if you want to punt him. Zachary, I think To me, Claudell's way better. Zachary at 7K, it's a minuscule price difference. Zachary is a steady performer, doesn't have the spikes or the major dips, so we're getting a little less upside there for safety. Prefer the upside with Claudell Harris. And then at 6'7", Devin McLaughlin. He had a monster first half against Miami. Then he died in the second half there. Don't particularly love him either. Still very heavily on Harris, but McLaughlin I don't mind. And then at 8'5", Quentin Post. 42 against Miami in their last matchup. Just Omier versus Post. Expect a ton of points to be scored across the board. And in their first meeting, he had 38 against them. So we're certainly going to be posting him at as a core play, scoring 35 plus points. Has great rates across the board, whether that's usage. He shoots a fine number from long range. Has elite block rates. Has elite rebounding rates. Total package overall. All right, that is the slate right there, all set. Very short. We will have the night slate posted up here relatively soon, I'm sure, now that those games have gone final. There is a interesting amount of contest there for the night slate, so we'll have content for both. In the morning, the article that drops will feature the early slate, but I will have a section for the night slate as well. So projection sheets for both slates in the Discord and everything else that you need to be successful, like player pools, course, all of that stuff will be posted for both slates. Have no fear. All right, core. Let's get down to business and talk core here. Now, there is a lot of guys above 7K that we like, not a lot under 5K that we like, or even under 6K. So we're going to have to probably make some sacrifices. And I think those sacrifices we have to make are to some of those appealing options up top, not absorbing, 3-3 guys that have so much downside, because I don't think that's going to work on this slate. So core play number one, and this could surprise some folks, will be John Newman at 6K, giving us the guard forward eligibility. Just torched them in this matchup. No reason to think he won't do it again. So we're starting there. Core play number two is going to be for me, the underpriced Norchad Omier at 8.2. I think it's just a very good price for him. He's going to put up 30 plus at minimum. There's upside for 40 plus. Absolutely heavily all in on Norchad Omier, and we'll be heavily on Quentin Post as well. And then core, as far as the core play number three, I am going to make it Claudell Harris. I am going to make Harris the posh play of the day once again. He carried the torch for us. I believe Mike Kutry used him against Miami and had a huge day. Won the big GPP, 222 maybe. It was obviously a lot cheaper then, but Harris running it back here, absolutely love him. Heavy exposure to Miami, Boston College. That will be the play. That's what a lot of people will do. We want to wait on news, strategy-wise, play the cheapies in the early game, work your way through, get a Cincy stack, and then see what happens with that DJ Horn and Nigel Pack news before deciding the rest of your lineup and how you're going to play it. If you're going to play, do it right. Check news, make swaps, make sure you're in tune with everything that's going on. This will be excellent practice for you for next week during the absolute madness and chaos that is morning to night basketball. All right, PrizePicks was pretty good today. Unfortunately, the rebounds didn't come through for BJ Freeman, but Rain Smith got his 3-point prop. We got Darlinson Dubar hit his steals prop, so we did good across the board there. Unfortunately, on our DK ticket, Noah Friedel had 14 combined points and assists on a 14.5 number. That one hurt, but that's okay. We are back and ready to do it again after hitting 2 of our 3 picks. There are going to be a numerous amount of options added later, which usually happens in the morning, and Fantasy Score, what I always like to look at. They never do it the night before, so keep that in mind if you're checking them out tonight. There are a few that we can look at that we want to get the lower number before it possibly changes, and that is going to be the first one on Jalen Sellers, who does come into it with a point prop of 14.5. I was hoping for 13.5, 12.5, somewhere in there, but Sellers, all of his fantasy points are going to come from scoring mostly. We talked about that at length. I do see him scoring close to 20 real here, and has to really, and there's going to be the opportunity. So over 14.5 points for Jalen Sellers. That is going to be the move that I'm on heavily there. No doubt about that. Dan Skillings over 13.5 points and over 21.5 PRA. I love Skillings in this matchup. No reason to think he won't just put up huge numbers. 30 plus, at really little resistance from this West Virginia team running it back. I don't think they've solved Cincinnati after they just saw them and gave up a ton to these guys. John Newman over 18.5 PRA. I've been trying to stay away from the PRA where possible, but when we get a low one like this, that's a bit of a gift. Johnny Newman at 18.5 PRA. I think he hits that over pretty comfortably as well. So we're going to be heavily invested in John Newman, both in DFS and the prop market, which we'll see on DK here and what they're offering. Let's just check and see some of the other games. The Wooga Poplar PRA number is also pretty interesting to me. It's 19.5. I think he's much better than that. People are going to be a little gun shy just because he's been so banged up and really kind of worn out. His points prop is also quite low at 12.5. So we'll hit the over 12.5 and 19.5 PRA. Those are going to be the PrizePicks numbers for us for tonight. That wraps up the show. Let's just go through and see if there's any funny lines where maybe they're out of whack. We had that Georgetown plus 20 line the other day where it was like, yeah, Georgetown's bad, but is St. John's 20 points better than anyone? I'm not so sure. All right, let's look. Milwaukee line against Oakland, the Horizon Finals open. Milwaukee's +5. That is, I wouldn't be surprised to see that be way less by game time. +5 Milwaukee, love that. I think those two teams, play to as close as it can be, one possession, possibly overtime. So get the +5 with Milwaukee. Yes, I'm on that. Stony Brook +7.5. The CAA final, we just saw earlier Charleston, they had some late game heroics and a good first half from Rain Smith to win. Stony Brook outlasted Hofstra, who went cold offensively in the second half. Stony Brook, the team of destiny, low seed in their conference. Now they have an opportunity to get the auto bid and win the CAA tournament. They're 7.5-point dogs to Charleston, but Charleston does not give me a ton of confidence. They go long spurts without scoring. I think Stony Brook does cover here. And you know what? I think they might win outright at +60. So we'll sprinkle the money line there as well. Stony Brook and Milwaukee, those are the two picks that I'm running with. Feel pretty damn good about both of those. One other one is the Summit League final, which takes place between South Dakota State, the perennial Summit League champions in the tournament often, against Denver. Maybe a bit of a surprise there. They're +8.5. I also like that. Taking dogs in these mid or low wager tournaments has been pretty profitable throughout the last few days. So we're going to stick with that theme. Denver +8.5 in the Summit League final versus South Dakota State. Count me in throwing them with Milwaukee and Stony Brook. That could be a fairly decent parlay. Don't forget to check out ftnbets.com. All of our bets are in the trackers there, and also our content on FTN Daily in the Discord as well, where we post picks throughout the various PrizePicks, betting, and DFS channels. All right, that wraps up the slate. Nice little bow. I want to thank everybody who tuned in to check us out live. We'll be back tomorrow night covering what will be, again, an early to mid slate and the night slate as well. Talking about the same thing, same time. Don't want to miss it. Make sure you continue to support us, not only by viewing the show, but also dropping a like. It really does help us quite a bit. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, back Friday, Saturday, and the Selection Sunday show as well. Please feel free to reach out to me in DMs, either on Twitter /X, whatever you want to call it, Discord, or if you have me on text or whatever. If you want to be in any of these bracket contests or draft leagues that we're planning, I want to get an idea of who wants to participate. Buy-ins are going to be not crazy, 50 to 100 probably at max. We'll see how it goes, what kind of turnout we get. The RotoWire League draft will be happening soon. I will be going on the air with all Raz and all those other guys there, so that'll be a fun thing to support. We'll get you guys the content info on that to check that out as well. Otherwise, let's get these green screens. Let's continue to bankroll, get some bankroll, and have fun while we have it, because one shining moment will be playing in the background before you know it, and you'll be having to explain to your kids why you are crying more about the end of college basketball than you were during their birth. Thanks, guys. Take care. Have a good day. See you later.